The alarm blared through the emergency ward of a small hospital in suburban Texas. A middle-aged man had collapsed in the hallway. His breathing shallow, his lips turning blue. "He doesn't have insurance," a senior nurse shouted, holding others back. But Emily Carter, fresh out of nursing school, her face pale but her eyes burning with determination, rushed forward. "It doesn't matter. He's dying," Emily shouted, dropping to her knees as her hands pressed firmly against his chest. "Performing CPR. Get me the crash cart. Now," she barked, her voice trembling but unyielding. For a heartbeat, the entire earth froze, every staff member watching as Emily crossed the invisible line between policy and human life. She knew she might lose her job, maybe even her license, but if she stayed still, this man would die, and Emily had already lost someone once before. The night air in West Texas was always heavy with dust. Every time the wind swept down from the flat plains, it carried the grit of dried earth into people's lungs, making them cough, making them remember how fragile their bodies truly were. For Emily Carter, that fragility had been carved into her heart long before she ever set foot in a nursing classroom. Her childhood was defined not by comfort, but by survival. The Carters lived in a weathered single-story home on the edge of Midland, its paint peeling and its roof patched together more with hope than with shingles. Emily's father had left when she was barely 6 years old, leaving her mother, Diana, to raise her alone. Diana worked endless shifts at Maggie's Diner, pouring coffee for oil workers and long-haul truckers, her apron perpetually stained with grease. Despite the exhaustion in her eyes, Diana never complained. At night, she'd sit beside Emily's bed, brushing the girl's hair from her forehead and whispering, "Baby, you're going to be more than this town lets you be. You're going to help people. Don't ever forget that." Emily never did forget, but life has a way of testing promises. The day everything changed. It was a Sunday morning in late October, when the Texas sky stretched wide and unforgiving. Emily, 17 at the time, was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing notes for a biology exam. Her mother was at the stove, frying bacon, humming softly to a country song playing on the old radio. Then, it happened. Diana dropped the spatula. Her body wavered like a tree in the wind before crumpling to the floor. Emily leapt up, her chair clattering backward. "Mom!" she screamed, kneeling beside her. Diana's breaths were shallow, her skin clammy. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, 20 minutes that felt like a lifetime. Emily rode with her, clutching her mother's cold hand as paramedics strapped an oxygen mask over her face. At the hospital, fluorescent lights flickered overhead, sterile and cold. Doctors muttered in clipped voices. Nurses rushed back and forth. But no one seemed in a hurry. Emily overheard a conversation she would never forget. "She doesn't have insurance. Then put her on hold until we get clearance." Clearance. The word seared into Emily's mind like fire. Her mother was gasping for life, and they wanted clearance. Hours later, they finally admitted Diana for tests. By then, her pneumonia had advanced beyond the point of recovery. Emily never forgave that delay. The promise. On her mother's last night, the machines beeped weakly in rhythm with her fading breath. Emily sat at her bedside, her eyes swollen from crying. She held her mother's hand, whispering fiercely as though her words alone could anchor Diana to the world. "I'm going to become a nurse," Emily promised. "I'll never let anyone die because they can't pay. I swear, Mom." Diana's lips curled into the faintest smile before her chest stilled forever. Emily's world collapsed in silence. From that moment, she carried the vow like a shield and a burden. It fueled her during long nights of studying, drove her to outpace every student in her nursing program. She memorized medical textbooks until her eyes blurred, volunteered in free clinics, and became known among her peers for one unshakable trait: she cared too much. The fire within. By the time she graduated, Emily had built a reputation as someone who not only excelled academically but also connected deeply with patients. In her rotations, she would sit by an elderly woman's bedside and listen to stories long after her shift had ended. She'd bring coloring books for children in the pediatric ward, buying them out of her own meager savings. Some classmates teased her. "You can't save the world, Emily," they said. "You'll burn yourself out." But Emily didn't mind. She wasn't trying to save the world, just one life at a time. That was enough. When she received her job offer at Greenfield Medical Center, a modest hospital serving both rural and suburban populations, she felt the pull of destiny. standing outside the building on her first day, her badge clipped to her scrub top. She whispered to herself, "This is where I start. This is where I keep my promise." What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Greenfield would challenge every fiber of her belief in compassion. Foreshadowing the storm, even in her first week, subtle cracks in the system revealed themselves. She noticed how administrators scrutinized patients' wallets more than their vitals. She overheard doctors grumble about wasting time on non-payers. One night, as she left the hospital after a grueling 12-hour shift, she paused in the parking lot, gazing back at the glowing red sign, Greenfield Medical Center. It looked imposing, almost unwelcoming. She remembered her mother's face that last night, the pale skin, the struggling breaths, the cruel delay. A chill ran through her. Emily thought she was entering a place of healing, but she was about to step into the very battlefield where compassion and profit would collide head-on. And she was about to choose which side she belonged to. Emily's shoes squeaked against the polished linoleum as she stepped into Greenfield Medical Center for her very first shift. The hospital smelled faintly of disinfectant, metallic and sharp, the kind of scent that clung to scrubs long after you left. She tugged nervously at her new badge clipped to her pocket, her name printed neatly beneath the bold word, RN. She had dreamed of this moment for years. This was the start of her career, the beginning of a life devoted to saving others. But as she crossed the bustling corridors, she felt the faintest unease humming under her excitement, like a violin string pulled too tight. The orientation. Carter, right? A woman in her 40s with cropped blonde hair greeted her briskly. "I'm Nancy. Been here 15 years. I'll be showing you the ropes." Nancy's smile was thin, her eyes already darting to the monitors beeping in the hallway. She walked fast, expecting Emily to keep up. "First rule," she said, her voice clipped. "This place runs on paperwork as much as medicine. Don't forget it." Emily nodded, though the words felt odd. She had expected lessons about patient care, not paperwork. They passed a man in a wheelchair whose eyes followed Emily hopefully. His leg was wrapped in a makeshift bandage. Before Emily could ask, Nancy leaned close. "Uninsured. He'll be waiting until administration approves charity care. Could be hours. Could be days." Emily frowned. "But he's bleeding. Not our problem until they sign off." Nancy interrupted, her tone flat. "Don't get soft on me, rookie. You'll only get burned." Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry. The patient's eyes still lingered in her mind long after they had turned the corner. The child with asthma, her second night on shift. The doors burst open as a mother rushed in, carrying a small boy wheezing violently. His breath shallow, his lips tinged blue. Emily hurried forward, adrenaline kicking in, already preparing a nebulizer. "Insurance card?" the intake clerk asked mechanically, not even looking at the boy. The mother stammered, panic in her eyes. I don't have it. Please, he can't breathe." The clerk pressed her lips into a thin line. "Policy requires proof of coverage for non-critical admissions." Emily froze. Non-critical? The boy's chest rattled like an old engine, each breath scraping against silence. She looked at the clerk, then at the mother's desperate eyes. "Let me treat him," Emily urged. Nancy's hand gripped her arm tightly. "Don't. If you touch him before clearance, you'll be written up. Let the doctors decide." Minutes dragged. Finally, the boy collapsed against his mother, too weak to cry. That broke the stalemate. Doctors rushed him in, but the delay had cost precious time. Emily stood against the wall, fists clenched so tight her nails cut into her palms. She thought of her mother gasping for air, waiting for clearance. Rage simmered, but she swallowed it, telling herself this was just one incident. But it wouldn't be the last. Jake, the construction worker. 2 weeks later, Emily was assigned to the orthopedic wing. That afternoon, a construction worker named Jake staggered in, clutching his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. His co-workers had driven him after a scaffolding accident. Emily rushed to prepare a sling. But before she could act, the admissions officer appeared with a clipboard. "Deposit first. Minimum $500 before we set the fracture." Jake groaned, sweat pouring down his face. I don't have it. Paychecks next week. Just fix it, please." Emily looked around, incredulous. "He's in agony. We can't just leave him." "Policy," the officer snapped. Jake's co-workers scrambled, pulling crumpled bills from their wallets, arguing about who had cash. Emily hovered helplessly, her chest tight. She wanted to scream, to defy, to act. But Nancy's warning echoed in her mind, don't get soft. You'll get burned. By the time Jake was finally admitted, nearly an hour had passed. His face was grey with pain. His breath shallow. Emily helped steady him as they wheeled him away, shame gnawing at her like a sickness. That night, she sat in her car long after her shift ended, hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. The hospital sign glowed red above her. Greenfield Medical Center. To her, it looked less like a sanctuary and more like a fortress with gates guarded by money. Conversations in the break room. Not all her colleagues were hardened. A young doctor named Raj Patel often lingered in the break room, rubbing tired eyes. He noticed Emily's silence one night after the Jake incident. You're struggling, he said softly. Emily exhaled shakily. How can you stand it? Turning people away, watching them suffer because of a card or a number in a bank account. Raj sighed. Because if I don't, I lose my license. I lose my chance to help anyone at all. So I play the game. I hate it, but it's survival. Emily looked at him, her jaw tight. But at what cost? He didn't answer. His silence was heavier than words. The breaking point. Over the following weeks, the pattern repeated. An old man with a cough dismissed until it became pneumonia. A young woman denied medication because her insurance had lapsed. Each story added weight to the invisible stone pressing on Emily's chest. Every time she walked the halls, she felt her mother's ghost beside her, whispering, "Don't let them suffer like I did." But how? She was a rookie, powerless against policies written in ink thicker than blood. Until that night in the night that would define everything. Foreshadowing Chapter 3. It began as a routine evening. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The rhythmic beep of monitors filling the air. Emily was charting patient vitals when she heard the sudden crash outside the doors. A man had collapsed in the hallway. His lips were blue, his chest barely rising. Emily's heart seized. She knew, instinctively, without hesitation, that this was her moment. The rules screamed one thing. Her promise whispered another. She didn't yet realize that by choosing, she would ignite a fire far larger than herself. The ER was chaos the moment Emily's hands pressed against the man's chest. Every compression was a defiance. Every second another violation of rules she had already chosen to break. Carter, stop. Nancy's voice sliced through the air, sharp as glass. You don't have clearance, he's uninsured. Emily barely heard her. The man's ribs groaned beneath her palms. His pulse a faint whisper beneath her fingers. Charge to 200, she yelled, locking eyes with the nearest resident physician. To her surprise, he hesitated only a moment before obeying. The paddles cracked against the man's chest, his body jerking violently. Emily held her breath. Then, there it was. A heartbeat. Weak, but steady. The man was alive, but the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was judgment. The aftermath in the Do you have any idea what you've done? Nancy's face was flushed, her jaw tight. Around them, the other staff shifted uneasily, avoiding Emily's eyes. Emily pulled off her gloves, her chest heaving. I saved him. You broke protocol. Protocol would have killed him. Nancy's voice dropped to a hiss. And protocol protects us from lawsuits, from bankrupting this hospital. You think compassion pays bills? Emily wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. She glanced at the man being wheeled into recovery, his chest still rising with each breath. Whatever the hospital said, she knew the truth. He was breathing because of her. The boardroom. 3 days later, Emily sat in a stark conference room, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. Across the table sat 4 administrators in dark suits, their faces carved from stone. Miss Carter, began the director, his voice smooth, rehearsed. You are here today because of a grave infraction. You administered emergency care without authorization to a patient who had no insurance coverage. Emily straightened in her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. With respect, sir, that patient was dying. I didn't have the luxury of waiting for authorization. If I had stood by, he would be dead. The director steepled his fingers. We do not dispute the immediacy of the situation, but rules exist for a reason. We cannot have staff deciding on their own when to disregard policy. Her heart pounded in her ears. So you're saying I should have watched him die? Is that what you expect from your nurses? One of the board members adjusted her glasses, her tone cold. We expect you to follow procedures. You are not a lone hero. You are an employee of this institution. The word employee stung, as if saving lives was nothing more than a transaction. A job description bound by invisible chains. Finally, the director delivered the verdict, effective immediately. You are suspended indefinitely. Turn in your badge. The words landed like a gavel. Stripped of her badge, Emily walked out of the boardroom in a daze, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. She unclipped her badge, staring at the bold letters, RN, the title she had worked years to earn. Her hand trembled as she set it on the secretary's desk. The world outside the hospital doors seemed unbearably bright. She stumbled into the parking lot, her vision blurred with tears. For a long moment, she just stood there, clutching her empty scrub pocket as though the absence of the badge had ripped a hole through her chest. When she finally slid into her car, the sobs came, ugly, choking sobs that shook her body. She cried for her mother, for the promise she had made, for the patient who might never know her name. And she cried because deep down, a voice whispered cruelly, what if they're right? What if you ruined your career for nothing? Doubt and resolve. That night, Emily sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the textbooks she had once devoured so eagerly. The pages looked foreign now, their neat diagrams of hearts and lungs mocking her. None of them spoke of insurance policies or boardrooms. None of them warned that saving someone could cost you everything. Her phone buzzed with messages from classmates who had heard the news. Some were sympathetic. I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this. Others were less kind. You should have known better. Rules are rules. She pushed the phone aside. The weight of doubt pressed heavily on her chest. Had she destroyed her future? Would any hospital hire her again? But then she remembered the man's chest rising after the shock. The fragile rhythm of life returning beneath her palms. That image was stronger than any fear. I saved him, and I'd do it again. Whispers of a video. 2 days later, Emily walked into a grocery store, her head down, hoping to avoid the pitying stares of neighbors who had read the local news. As she grabbed a carton of milk, she overheard 2 teenagers whispering in the next aisle. Did you see that video? The nurse yelling at the saying, he's dying, crazy stuff, man, it's blowing up. Her chest tightened. Video. Later that night, she found it. Grainy, shaky phone footage captured from the hallway. It showed her kneeling over the man, shouting for the crash cart, defying Nancy's orders. Her voice was raw, desperate. It doesn't matter. He's dying. And then, the miracle. The man's body jolting from the shock. The faint beeping of life returning. The clip had already been shared thousands of times. Comments poured beneath it. This is what real healthcare should look like. How is she suspended for saving a life? We need more nurses like her. Emily stared at the screen, her heart thundering. She had thought she was alone, crushed by the weight of punishment. But here, in the flood of voices rising on her behalf, she felt something she hadn't in weeks. Hope. The first call came at dawn. Emily's phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand, dragging her from a restless sleep. She groaned, fumbling for it, expecting maybe a classmate checking in or a relative offering sympathy. Instead, the screen flashed an unknown number. Miss Carter, this is Channel 7 News. We'd like to ask you about the video. Emily hung up immediately, her heart racing. Video. She had tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just a blip on the internet, something that would fade in a day or two. But the calls kept coming. Reporters, bloggers, even strangers who somehow found her number. When she finally gave in and opened her social media, she nearly dropped her phone. The clip had over 1 million views. Hashtags trended with her name. Strangers were calling her a hero. Some were calling her reckless. But either way, everyone was talking about her. The protest outside the hospital. By the end of the week, she couldn't even drive past Greenfield Medical Center without seeing the crowd. Dozens of people stood on the sidewalk, holding handmade signs. Saving lives is not a crime. Let nurses do their jobs. We are all patients. The chants echoed down the street, growing louder with each passing day. Reporters swarmed the hospital entrance, shoving microphones toward anyone in scrubs. Emily parked 2 blocks away, slouched low in her seat, and watched in disbelief. She had never asked for this. All she had wanted was to keep a man alive. Now her face was plastered across posters, her name painted on banners like she was some kind of icon. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Raj, the young doctor she had befriended. You should see this. People are fighting for you. For us. Emily didn't reply. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. The hospital's response. Greenfield Medical Center released an official statement 2 days later. Emily read it on a news site, her eyes skimming each cold sentence. We uphold the highest standards of medical care and ethical responsibility. While we commend our staff's dedication, we cannot condone actions that disregard established procedures. Miss Carter's decision, though well-intentioned, jeopardized both patient safety and the hospital's integrity. Emily threw her phone onto the couch, fury coursing through her veins. Patient safety, integrity, they were twisting everything. She hadn't endangered the man, she had saved him. The only thing she had jeopardized was their bottom line. But the public wasn't buying it. Comment sections brimmed with outrage. Integrity, letting someone die is integrity. Hospitals care more about money than lives. This proves it. Emily Carter is the kind of nurse I want in my hospital. The hospital had wanted to bury her. Instead, they had only fueled the fire. Unwanted fame. At the grocery store, strangers stopped her in the aisles. You're the nurse from the video, aren't you? God bless you. They wanted to shake her hand, hug her, take pictures. Emily forced polite smiles, but inside she felt like she was shrinking. She wasn't a leader. She wasn't brave. She was just a rookie nurse who had done what felt right. At night, she lay awake, scrolling through the avalanche of messages. Some called her a hero. Others threatened her, accusing her of undermining the system. The weight of it pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. One evening, Raj called. You can't hide forever, Emily. People need to hear your voice. They need to know why you did it. Her throat tightened. I don't know how to do that. I'm not a speaker. I'm just me. Exactly, Raj said softly. That's why they'll listen. The invitation. The email arrived the next morning. Subject line, invitation to speak at state rally. A coalition of healthcare reform advocates was organizing a protest at the state capitol. They wanted Emily to address the crowd. She stared at the screen, her heart hammering. The idea of standing in front of thousands of people made her stomach churn. She pictured herself freezing, stuttering, collapsing under the weight of expectation. Her finger hovered over the delete button. But then she thought of her mother, gasping for air, waiting for clearance. She thought of the boy with asthma, the man with the broken arm, the countless faces turned away because of paperwork. Her hand shook as she clicked reply. I'll do it. The Capitol steps. 3 weeks after her suspension, Emily stood on the marble steps of the Texas state capitol, her palms damp with sweat. The plaza below was packed with people, families, patients, nurses, doctors, ordinary citizens holding signs aloft. Their voices blended into a roar that seemed to shake the very ground. She glanced at Raj, who had driven her there. He gave her a reassuring nod. Just speak from the heart. The microphone loomed in front of her, attached to a podium covered in banners. Cameras lined the edges of the crowd, red lights blinking. She could almost feel millions of eyes watching through their screens. Her legs trembled as she stepped forward. For a moment, she froze. The crowd quieted, waiting. Then she took a deep breath and spoke. I am not a hero. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. I am a nurse. I did what anyone should do. I saved a man's life. A murmur rippled through the crowd. But the system I work under told me I was wrong. It told me that saving someone without insurance was a violation. And if that is what the system demands, if it demands that we let people die, then it is the system that is broken. Not us. The crowd erupted. Cheers thundered. Chants echoed. Signs waved high. Emily's voice grew stronger with every word. I made a promise when I was 17 years old, holding my mother's hand as she died because no one would treat her without insurance. I promised I would never turn away from someone in need. And I will not break that promise. Her words carried across the plaza, into cameras, onto screens across the state. By the time she stepped back from the podium, trembling with adrenaline, she realized she had crossed another line. She was no longer just a suspended nurse. She was a symbol. The morning after her speech at the state capitol, Emily woke to find her name everywhere. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications, interview requests, messages from strangers, voicemails piling up faster than she could delete them. On television, pundits dissected her words, analyzing her trembling voice as though it were scripture. Emily Carter represents the compassion missing in our healthcare system. One anchor declared, she's naive. Countered another, A rookie nurse who doesn't understand the complexities of policy. Emily muted the screen, her head spinning. She wasn't ready for this storm. She hadn't chosen to be here. And yet, she was in the eye of it now. The media frenzy. By the end of the week, she was seated beneath bright studio lights. Microphones clipped to her collar. The first talk show appearance had come reluctantly. Raj had convinced her that silence would only let others define her story. So, Emily, the host said, leaning forward with polished charm, do you consider yourself a whistleblower? Or perhaps the face of a new movement? Emily's throat tightened. I don't see myself as a whistleblower or a leader. I'm just a nurse. I saw a man dying. And I did what I swore to do. Save him. The audience applauded, but the host pressed on. But your actions have sparked protests. Calls for reform. People are looking to you. Doesn't that make you responsible for what happens next? Emily's palms sweated under the desk. Responsible. The word hung heavy in the air. She forced herself to answer. If speaking the truth makes me responsible, then yes. But the truth is simple. No one should die because of paperwork. The clip went viral by nightfall. Courted by politicians. Soon, the invitations shifted from newsrooms to backrooms. Lawmakers reached out, some cautiously, some eagerly. A young state representative, Daniel Ruiz, requested a private meeting. In a quiet cafe tucked off Congress Avenue, Daniel leaned across the table, his suit slightly wrinkled, his eyes intense. Emily, your story has galvanized the people. You've done in 3 weeks what activists have tried to do for years. We finally have momentum to push through a healthcare reform bill. But we need you. Emily stirred her coffee nervously. Need me? I'm not a politician. That's exactly why you matter. Daniel pressed. You're not tainted by politics. You're a nurse. A daughter who lost her mother to the system. You're real. That's why people listen. She shook her head. But I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to save lives. Daniel's voice softened. Sometimes, symbols are the only things powerful enough to change laws. You can either step back and watch this chance slip away, or you can carry the voice of the people who trust you. Emily stared at the steam rising from her cup. Deep down, she knew he was right. The movement had grown beyond her control. She could either let others shape it, or she could step into the fire herself. The weight of expectation. That night, Emily sat on her porch, staring into the Texas sky the way she had as a teenager after her mother's death. Back then, she had made a promise to save people. Now, the promise had evolved into something far greater, far heavier. Her phone buzzed with messages from strangers. My husband died waiting for clearance. Thank you for speaking up. Please keep fighting. We need you. You give me hope. Each word felt like a stone added to the weight on her shoulders. She wasn't sure she could bear it. Raj joined her later, carrying 2 cups of tea. He set one beside her, then sat quietly until she finally whispered, "What if I fail them?" Raj looked at her gently. You didn't fail the man in the You didn't fail your mother's memory. And you won't fail these people, not because you're perfect, but because you care. That's what they see in you. Emily took a shaky sip of tea. For the first time, the fear inside her loosened its grip just a little. The turning point. 2 weeks later, Emily stood in a crowded committee room at the state capitol. Lawmakers debated fiercely, their words clashing like swords. At the center of it all was the proposed Healthcare Accessibility Act. A bill that would expand emergency care protections to uninsured patients across the state. Daniel caught her eye across the room and gave a slight nod. When it was her turn to testify, Emily walked to the microphone. Her legs trembled, but her voice carried strength she didn't feel. My mother died waiting for clearance. I was 17. She was uninsured, and the hospital delayed her care until it was too late. Years later, I faced the same choice in the I chose differently. I chose life. The chamber fell silent. No nurse, no doctor, no human being should have to weigh a person's life against a piece of paper. If you pass this bill, you won't just change laws. You'll save lives. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Lawmakers exchanged tense glances. For the first time, Emily felt the tide shifting. The cost of a symbol. But fame brought shadows. That evening, as she walked to her car, a man approached her in the parking lot. His voice filled with venom. You're ruining the system, he spat. You think care is free? Someone has to pay. You'll bankrupt us all. Emily froze. fear prickling her skin, until Raj stepped between them, escorting her quickly away. But the encounter lingered in her mind. For every voice that praised her, there were others that cursed her. Back home, she sat in the dark, clutching her phone, torn between exhaustion and determination. She had asked for none of this. And yet, the choice was no longer hers. The movement had her face now, her voice, her story, and she could not walk away. The marble columns of the Texas state capitol gleamed in the morning sun, towering like ancient sentinels over the city. Crowds had gathered outside long before the session was scheduled to begin. Nurses in scrubs held signs. Families clutched photos of loved ones lost to the system, and reporters jostled for the best angles. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Emily Carter sat in the gallery overlooking the chamber floor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could hear the murmur of lawmakers below, their voices sharp and hurried, echoing off the chamber walls. The Healthcare Accessibility Act was on the docket today. Months of debate, weeks of protests, and countless sleepless nights had all led to this moment. Emily's heart pounded as the roll call began. The weight of memory. She closed her eyes and was 17 again. Her mother's hand cold in hers. Machines beeping steadily in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and despair. The memory rose like a tide, threatening to drown her. She opened her eyes quickly, anchoring herself in the present. Across the chamber, she spotted Representative Daniel Ruiz, the young lawmaker who had urged her to step into the fight. He glanced up, met her gaze, and gave a small, encouraging nod. Emily exhaled shakily. She wasn't alone anymore. The debate, colleagues. A senator's voice rang out below, smooth and commanding. This bill is reckless. Expanding emergency care to uninsured patients without securing funding will drive our hospitals into bankruptcy. Compassion without responsibility is chaos. Murmurs of agreement rippled through half the chamber. Another voice rose in response. Reckless? What's reckless is letting citizens die in hallways because of bureaucracy. What's reckless is punishing a nurse for saving a life. This bill is not just policy, it's humanity. Applause erupted from the gallery, quickly silenced by the speaker's gavel. Emily's chest tightened. Her story was no longer just hers, it was ammunition. A weapon wielded by both sides. The vote. The chamber settled into silence as the clerk began the roll call. One by one, names were called. Each answered with a clipped aye or nay. Emily gripped the wooden railing in front of her until her knuckles turned white. With each name, her pulse quickened. The numbers climbed, the margin razor thin. She could feel the tension in the gallery, the collective holding of breath, the quiet prayers whispered under tense exhalations. Finally, the last name was called. The clerk read the tally. By a vote of 51 to 49, the Healthcare Accessibility Act passes. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the chamber erupted. The release. Tears blurred Emily's vision as the gallery shook with cheers. Strangers hugged one another. Nurses waved their stethoscopes in the air like flags. Outside, the roar of the crowd carried through the Capitol walls. A wave of sound so powerful it seemed to shake the earth. Emily pressed her hand to her mouth, sobbing quietly. She had held her breath for so long, since the night her mother died. Since the night she defied protocol. Since the day she was suspended, and now, finally, she could breathe. Raj appeared at her side, his smile wide, his eyes glassy with pride. You did it, he whispered. Emily shook her head. No, we did. The aftermath. The following days blurred into a whirlwind. News stations broadcast images of jubilant crowds. Headlines blazed. State passes historic healthcare reform. From suspended nurse to symbol of change. The Carter ACT, compassion triumphs. Emily found herself at the center of it all. Invited to panels. Interviewed endlessly. Praised and criticized in equal measure. Some called her a hero. Others warned she was the start of unsustainable policy. But Emily no longer measured herself by their words. She had seen the bill pass. She had seen hope light up the faces of people who once felt invisible. That was enough. The choice. Weeks later, Emily stood once more outside Greenfield Medical Center. The red letters of the hospital sign glowed against the twilight sky. She hadn't set foot inside since turning in her badge. For a moment, she considered walking through those doors, reclaiming her place. But as she stared at the building, she realized she had outgrown it. She wasn't meant to return. Instead, she pulled a folded sheet of paper from her pocket, a flyer she had designed herself. At the top, bold letters read, Diana's Promise Foundation, free clinics for the uninsured. Named for her mother, the nonprofit would provide care to those still falling through the cracks. She had already secured volunteers, donations, and a small building on the outskirts of town. It was humble, imperfect, but it was hers. Emily smiled through the sting of tears. She whispered into the evening air, as if her mother could hear, I kept my promise. The legacy. Months later, textbooks in nursing schools included her story. Professors spoke of the Carter case as an example of ethics clashing with policy, of courage redefining practice. Her face appeared on murals. Her words quoted on posters. No one should die because of paperwork. Emily never sought fame, but she accepted her role. Not as a politician, not as an icon, but as a nurse who had refused to stay silent. Closing scene. On the anniversary of her mother's death, Emily stood outside the small clinic she had founded. Families lined the sidewalk, waiting for care they could not afford elsewhere. Volunteers bustled inside, preparing examination rooms. A little girl tugged on her sleeve. Miss Emily, my mom says you're the reason we can see a doctor today. Emily knelt down, smiling warmly. No, sweetheart, your mom is the reason. She believed enough to come here. I just kept the doors open. The girl hugged her tightly. Emily closed her eyes, her heart swelling. For the first time in years, the ache of loss softened, not erased, but transformed into something enduring. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the clinic's sign, Diana's Promise, Emily Carter knew this was only the beginning. She had started as a nurse with nothing but a promise. Now, she was a symbol of change. Proof that one act of courage could ripple outward and alter the fate of thousands. And all of it had begun in a hallway, when she looked at a dying man and chose to save him.